Hi everybody, Sam from CG Candy back again. Today I'm going to talk about camera navigation and um, viewport. Hi everybody, Sam here from CG Candy. Today I'm going to do another quick tip tutorial for Cinema4D, and today I'm going to be talking about how to animate and navigate with a camera, as well as just sort of getting around the scene using hotkeys and how to move your camera. All right, so without any delay, let's get started. So right here I have just a simple mountain object and a little sphere in there to use as a example of something you might want to move a camera around. I'm going to put a couple keyframes on that real quick. Don't worry about how I'm doing this. That's not for this tutorial. Alright, so we've got a little animation in there, and now we want to set up a camera so we can actually render this out. So what's the first thing we want to do? Alright, so by default, you are looking through a camera. You can see I have these green lines up here. That is something that I've turned on and I've colored that way. It doesn't have to be that way. In fact, let me, um, let me change a couple of things here. So I'll go into this later. Let me turn. Where are we? Go to view settings and we want to turn off our. There we go. Okay. Okay, so you can see that I have these darkened areas on the edge. I can actually turn those up in my settings. This is the size of my render right now. Okay, so before you start setting up your camera, um, let's turn them to the way that we actually want to render. It doesn't make sense to be picking camera angles that you're going to use to render if your cropping is not correct and it's not going to match what you end up with. So before we go any further, let's change that. So we want to click on this button here, which is the render settings. Got the little gear on it. Let's click that. And we want to go over here and look at this line here that says output. And you're going to see that it's 800 by 600. This is 4:3 ratio, which is not commonly used anymore. This is an older format for old boxy televisions, and most people don't. Sometimes you're going to have to output for this. Maybe if you're just getting started in CG, it'll be gone by the time you get there. But now what we use is 16:9. So the most common format is 1920 by 1080. You can do anything you want, especially if you're rendering a still image. You don't have to stick to this, but I'm used to working for television and things like that. So I do 1920, 1080. It doesn't matter as long as you keep that 16:9 ratio. You could change it to 965/40, for instance. You can hit this lock ratio button and you can change it. But 1920, 1080, when you hear people say HD, that's what they're talking about. So let's keep it at that. All right. Um, Next thing you're going to want to do is let's set our first camera angle. So we just want to move this camera to look at something the way we want it. Alright, so what I'm doing, let's see, there's zoom. A couple of the ways we can do this. One is you can roll your mouse wheel back and forth, like you're zooming in on a website or scrolling up and down. And you can see it zooming sort of to where my mouse is being placed. That's just the way cinema works. Another way you can do this is you hold Alt and you do right mouse button, and you can go up or down. You can go left or right. Left is out, right is in, and this is kind of a little more precise than doing the middle mouse. You can see it's kind of steppy here, and you get a little more precision here. You can do really small increments. All right, so that's how you zoom in. We can orbit around our mouse click here. The way you do that is you hold Alt and you do left mouse button instead of right, which was the zoom. You do Alt and left mouse, and now we're orbiting around that spot. You can see it's a little wonky trying to get around something like here. You can anyway. Let's just do that for now. Alt and left click to rotate, middle mouse to zoom, or Alt and right click, and then we want to do So we've done zooming and we've done rotating or orbiting, and now we want to do panning. So that would be Alt and middle mouse. Now you can pan around, so it's like taking your camera and sliding it like on a dolly, for instance. You can also pan up or down. Alright, so those are the main controls with the camera. So now let's set up our first camera angle, okay? So let's just find a good view of this wherever we want to. This is just an example, so it doesn't matter too much. Alright, let's try here. I'm going to go back in time, so let's pick a frame that actually works on the timeline so we could do a little camera animation here. How about, mine's moving that way, you can see that little path there, so I'm going to just start somewhere up here. Alright, so first off, let's just make a camera in this spot, because right now you're using Cinema's default camera, and I'm not sure if you even can place keyframes on it, but for the most part you don't want to. So we want to make our own camera that we can do anything we want with instead of just the viewport editor camera. So we're going to click on this and hold down, and there's different types of cameras, and let's start with just the regular camera. So go ahead and make one of those. And you can see that it didn't look like it did a whole lot, but it created this camera, excuse me, and it also positioned it exactly where you were already looking. So right now, if I move my camera, oh look, the camera just stayed there. It didn't follow me. Well, the reason for that is because although you created it in the same point you were looking, here I can do it again, you're not actually looking through it yet. So what you have to do to look through it is you have to click on this little button here. It's like a little, it's four corners with a little plus sign in the middle. Let's click that. It's going to turn white, and now that camera is our active camera. So now if we disable it again, we'll go back to the editor camera, which will stay where you left it. So if I were to, oops, I got a big sphere around this stuff here. Delete that. If I were to keep my camera right here, this is my editor camera, and there's my camera that I created. Now I click on it, and it goes into that view. Alright, so now when we move it, it's not going to create a keyframe unless you have automatic keyframes turned on. So let's talk about that. So select your camera. Let's place a keyframe with this little key button here, the circle around it. Alright, we have one keyframe. So let's move ahead in time, and my object's moving, so let's follow it with the camera. So now we'll use those commands that we learned before. The Alt right mouse button, we'll zoom in on that. And let's make another keyframe now that we're in that new position. And you have to make sure you still have your camera selected here. So go ahead and make another keyframe. And there we go. Now let's play that back. Alright, so we have some initial camera animation. Now let's go to our last frame 90 here, and I'm going to move in even closer. We'll create our third keyframe for the camera. So let's go ahead and make a keyframe there, and we'll hit play again. Alright, so it's a pretty bad camera movement, but it's just for example here. Alright, now let's go out of our camera and let's look at what we did there. So now you can see that the camera also has this path behind it. If you click on the sphere, you can see the path of the sphere, and you can see the path of the camera, and you can see these bigger circles on this path are our keyframes, so you can know exactly where it is in space. And alright, so now that's the first step to creating a camera movement. And you can see, this just doesn't look like a nice camera. It's sort of swimming around like a fish. So use your best judgment there when you're creating your own. Alright, so let's look back through that. What else can we do? Okay, so let's say you want this to behave kind of like After Effects does, or and place automatic keyframes. So if I click this circle button with the sort of refresh looking sign on it, now automatic keyframe is activated. I don't like to use this very much because I always forget to turn it off and it creates problems for me, but some people, this is just the way they're used to working. So I'm going to go on frame 60 and I'm going to move my camera around, and you can see that it's now created a new keyframe on frame 60. So that might be the way you like to work. You can go back to frame 0, you can just move it around, you don't have to hit that, you don't have to select anything specific, you don't have to click that key. But just remember to turn it off when you're not using it, or you might create all these issues for yourself later. All right, so that's two ways to move the camera around and to place keyframes. Um, Next up, let's see what else we can talk about. Oh, let's talk about a target camera. Okay, so I'm going to make a new camera, target camera. So what this does is it creates two objects, a camera target and a camera. And again, if this is something you've seen before, I apologize, but to some people this might be new. All right, so this camera, what it is it's just like the other camera, except it has this little tag on it that's telling it to always look at this camera target. So let me move my timeline so you can see. It's a null object, so it's not really showing up. I'm going to delete my old camera for right now. But if you select it, you can see where it is. So basically, anywhere that uh, this camera target moves, and actually look, I'm creating keyframes again. So this is what I was talking about turning off that auto keyframe. So let me turn that off. Anywhere that I move this camera target, it's gonna look at. So this is pretty cool. So what I could do, one example here, is I could parent the target to the sphere. So whenever the sphere moves, the target will follow it, and therefore the camera will follow the target. So let's see what happens if I do that. Seems to be moving a little off of it. Why is that happening? Stand by, please. Okay, so it just happened because it's really offset from the sphere. So let me go to the top view, which I did that by just clicking the middle mouse. And you can see how far this target is away from the actual sphere. So I'm going to move it down right on top of it, right in the middle. I'll check my front view here. It's kind of above it as well. So I'll move that down. And now, okay, so we look through our camera again, and there we go. So anywhere this sphere moves, my camera is just going to stare at it constantly. So that's one thing you can do with this. Um, and also you can offset it from the object. So because it's parented to it, I could, if I want it to be a little lower than it, I could put it down at the bottom of it, and it's still going to follow it around like that. So this is really helpful for certain things. For instance, logo animation. You always want to be focused on that logo. And now that I have that target animated, I could also animate my camera. So I can go back to the camera, can turn on my automatic keyframing, and I can put some animation on the camera as well. So let's just do one big move here. Go back to the beginning. There we go. So now we have an interesting little fly through here happening. We're focused on that target. Okay, so those are the main types of cameras. There's a bunch of new cameras, this camera crane and things, but I think these are the basic ones. These are in any 3D program you're going to use, so I would stick to, excuse me, the basic ones for now. Let's see what else we have in here. Okay, so let's say now we want to do something with this. Okay, we've created our animation, we've created our camera move, and now we want to actually render it. So I'll make another video later where we talk more about specific rendering techniques and things like that. But for now, let's just get a basic render going. So there's a couple things you can do. So before you do your full render, you might want to do a preview render. So you just click and hold on this middle button here. You go to make preview. And okay, so full render means it's going to use the full settings, but you don't have to pick where it's going and all that, so that's pretty handy. You can do software preview where it's going to use some lower settings, and hardware preview, which is just going to be like wireframe and really low. Usually I keep this at full render. Now all frames would be your whole project range. Preview range would be like if I were to shrink this down and only preview a small section, it would be that. I usually use manual where you just type what you want in there. So 0 to 90 is what we have. And now the nice thing about this preview is it's easy to create a smaller version of this. Instead of that 1080 canvas that we were working at, we can shrink it down. So it doesn't change the ratio, so it's only going to ask you the first number. So our first number was 1920 by 1080. So it's going to change the 1920. So let's try 320. It's super small. The frame rate, you want to usually match whatever your project is set at. And you can pick an output. I'm on Windows here, so it has that AVI setting. I don't know if that's on Mac as well. Let's do QuickTime. You can go in and change the options, but you don't really need to. So let's go ahead and hit OK. It's calculating the preview down here. It's going really fast because my scene is so simple. And now we have a picture viewer that popped up, and we can watch our render and we can decide if we want to make changes or if we're ready to use this. So let's just say, you know what, I like this, but it's boring because I want some light on it. I want a shadow. I'm going to make a light. I'm going to go to general. I'm going to put on a soft shadow. And I'm just doing this as an example here. This is obviously a really basic scene. Okay, so now I'm ready to render for real. So what do I do? Well, this all depends on what you want. Let's go to our edit render settings with the gear again, and we'll click on save. Um, we can turn this off. I was doing something earlier with that. And let's pick, okay, this is all set up from earlier. Let's just say, because we have our 1920 1080. Okay, so right now, actually, this is set to current frame. So because I'm on frame 59, you can see it's changing it as I slide around. It's just rendering one frame. So maybe you're doing just a still render, you just want to do a thing. This is fine then, you can leave it at what it's at. But because we're animating a camera, I'm assuming that you want to do a actual animation. So let's set it to manual. This is the one I like to use the most. So 0 would be the first frame and 90 would be the last. So let's type in 90. Frame step, this is if you want to skip frames and render every other frame or so on. But I don't usually do that unless the circumstance calls for it. So 0 to 90, okay. And now we want to click our image settings, okay. So let's make sure save is checked. We're going to click on these dots and we're going to pick an output. So let's go ahead and click on that. Let's see, it's taking a second on mine for some reason. I kind of froze my computer up for a second. Alright, there we go. Okay, so you pick where you want it to save, maybe on the desktop if you're clumsy like me. Anywhere you want it to be. Type a name for it. Sphere Mountain. Okay. The format. Alright, this is important. So what do you want? What do you want to make? Do you want a image sequence that you can mess with in After Effects? Do you want it to already be nicely packaged into a QuickTime so that you can just put it on YouTube? This is all about whatever you want. You can see Photoshop, JPEG. Don't use JPEG too often because JPEG is very compressed and things like that. So usually I use a QuickTime movie. It should be by default set to animation. That is as close to uncompressed as you're going to get, really. So it's going to be a huge file, but it's going to look really good. If you do H.264, that's lower, a little bit more compression, but it's going to be way smaller on your computer, so that might be good too. That's what YouTube likes as well. All right, let's set it to animation and go ahead and check all these. You don't have to worry about depth. None of this really is too important. Alpha channel. So do you want anywhere there's a background, do you want that to have an alpha channel? Do you want it to have transparency? So right now I have nothing back there. If I turn off alpha channel, it's going to just probably put black back there. If I turn on alpha channel, it'll put transparency so that in a compositing program like After Effects, I could put an image back there and I could put like a space back there and I could make a cool background for it. So a lot of times you'll want that, and some formats support alphas, some don't. JPEG, for example, does not let you do an alpha channel. Alright, so again, let's basic stuff. Let's go ahead and hit, let's just check all this. Yep, we're good. Alright, let's hit render. So now it's going through, it's doing my full size 1920 1080 render. Okay, it looks like I left on, I might have left on my auto keyframe and I keyframed shadows. Yeah, you see there, so there's a keyframe on the shadows, so it animated the shadows turning on, which doesn't look very good, but that's okay. This is just an example. So there we go. We have our animation coming out. It's just doing its thing. You can see it's rendering. And we don't really need to wait for this because it's nothing special and you don't really need to see the finished product. But hopefully that helped you guys with camera movement, camera keyframing, and rendering. And in another tutorial, I will teach you how to make a spline and animate it along a path so that you can have a specific path of following something, which is good for fly-throughs. Alright guys, well I hope this tutorial was helpful for you. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you guys have any requests of what to do next. Enjoy.